Hello, I am Georgina Rose, and welcome back to the Dr. Only YouTube channel. On this YouTube channel, we discuss everything related to magic, mysticism, religion, and everything on the fringe of esoterica. And in this video, we're going to be talking about budget occultist tips. Basically, how to have a good and functioning occult practice without spending as much money as you possibly could. I think a lot of people, when they are new to occultism, they tend to spend a lot of money when they're in that early phase, right? They tend to want to get a ritual kit, an altar kit. They tend to really want to get an elaborate setup. And if you are further along in your practice, this video can still be helpful, right? We all love saving money. I mean, who doesn't love, when they realize they have a little bit more money than they thought? And this is basically just some tips on how to do that. So in the past, I did make a video like this about ceremonial magic in particular, but I kind of wanted to expand the conversation outwards and touch upon all occult disciplines. So some of these tips do apply to ceremonial magic, but others apply to witchcraft, mysticism, theurgy, and even devotional paganism. Honestly, I think anyone who has any sort of spiritual practice could probably benefit from at least some of these tips. They're going to be, very different in nature, covering a bunch of different things. So I hope at least one can help you. This is also a much more practical and mechanical oriented video than I typically do. So yeah, let's talk about the logistics of ritual. So first of all, the easiest way to save money in your ritual practice is to basically be part of a practice that doesn't require you to spend a lot of money. This seems very obvious, but I am going to list some practices that have basically no cost at all. In reality, if you are doing a practice like ceremonial magic, you probably will at some point at least spend some money on your practice. If you're into Enochian, there are certain tools you need to have. Now, of course, you can save money on those tools, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But, there are other practices that literally have no material cost at all. And that would be obviously dream magic. You don't need any materials to dream. Now, some people do use dream teas or dream journals, but technically you need zero money to do dream magic. Presumably you also have a phone or computer if you're watching this. I mean, I like to watch YouTube on my computer, but I know some people do on their phone, but you have some sort of device if you're watching this. I don't know how else you would see it if you don't have a phone or computer. Maybe you're watching this on one of those smart fridges. At that point, I don't know, maybe you could keep your dream journal in your fridge, but you might want something to keep tracking. But you could totally use something you already have, like a digital device. As well, astral projection, that takes no materials at all. There's no point in even using any materials. Some people use a timer for astral projection, but I think that's a terrible idea because I think that actually disrupts the experience. I think having no tools is the ideal way to do astral projection. As well, the majority of mysticism-oriented traditions have very little material, right? If you're in a tradition where basically what you do is you contemplate, you meditate, and you connect to the gods in that way, you're not really going to have a lot of ingredients or tools. You're basically going to have nothing. So of course, the easiest way to save money is to basically do a practice that doesn't have a lot of materials, getting into mysticism, theurgy. But of course, that's not everyone's practices. And I don't think that should be the sole reason you choose those practices. So let's get into some more, logistical tips for people who may have, other interests in their spiritual practice besides pure contemplation and zazen meditation forever. So the first tip on how to save money in your spiritual practice is to not exclusively shop at witch and occult stores. Look, witch and occult stores are awesome, and I think it's great to support our community. I think it's awesome to support people in this space, but a lot of materials you can get other places for cheaper. Try out craft stores. Those can be super helpful. They have a lot of candles at pretty good prices. They have a lot of other things like jars that you might use. As well, try a botanica. Sometimes a botanica versus a witch shop, you'll see a price gap. So the same type of figure candle or token candle will be way cheaper at the botanica. As well, definitely try your grocery store, right? A lot of herbs and spices can be bought in the spice aisle, and you don't even necessarily need to go to the fancy organic grocery store. Even your Kroger or your Food Line has a spice section, and a lot of those spices can be used as ritual materials, offerings, and so on. So definitely check out all those places. Don't just lock yourself into going to witch stores. That is an easy way to overspend. So the next tip is going to be for people who use plant material in any aspect of their practice, whether that is anointing oils, tinctures, or raw plant material. If you do any sort of magia naturalis, the best thing you can do is to forage for those plant materials. And this also applies to people who are, say, ceremonial magicians and use anointing oils. So if you can forage for the plant, flower, or herb that is going into that oil, or for the plant, flower, herb you're using in your spell, you're definitely gonna save money. Also, foraging is a really nice sort of hobby, and it allows you to remain connected to nature. And obviously in our spiritual practice, we wanna remain connected to nature. We wanna have a real relationship with the land. And also, of course, you can grow things. If you have the space, you can grow your own materials. And if it's a material that doesn't grow in your region, you can get what's called a grow lamp and pretty much grow anything. I knew people in New York who were growing like European witching herbs that are very hard to get. And they were just using grow lights for that process. So definitely try growing. And also when you do grow your own, plants that you're using in your practice, you really do, you tend to them, right? You're constantly feeding them. You're putting your energy into them every time you water them, right? You're developing a real relationship. And it can actually help you sort of go down the path of phytonosis, or knowledge through plants. That's kind of a term that was pitched by Shulky of the Cult of Sabati. But basically by connecting to that plant, it does sort of infuse it with more intention. Generally, if you do something yourself, which is of course, a great way to save money, you actually put more intention into what you are creating. And so in a sense, it can actually be more powerful. So yeah, forage and grow things. And to make oils, like if you're a ceremonial magician and you like a specific anointing oil, say you want a Venus oil, if you grow, and this may require a lamp depending on your area, but like if you grow like a hibiscus flower, you can make that oil yourself. It's not actually that challenging to make a lot of sort of simple herbal preparations. Like you don't need to be an expert herbalist. And if you make it yourself, you can make sure that you are creating food grade preparations. Of course, read about how to do that before you do that. But generally, like it's pretty straightforward to make a lot of like materials that we are using in ritual on a regular basis. Okay, so the next tip is specifically for ceremonial magic, and that is to not buy a circle mat. Okay, so if you go on Etsy and you look up ceremonial magic, one of the main things you're gonna see is these circle mats. Okay, so these circle mats are basically like carpets that say the name of the different gods and spirits like around it. They're all incredibly expensive, right? Like I see them go for so much, and often the materials really do not justify the price that they're at. Sometimes they do, okay, and I do not want to, make craftsmen think that I am knocking on their, practices. Like if you find one that is a good seller, like I'm not shaming you or saying that they shouldn't get their business. They absolutely should. We should support small businesses. But also you can get a circle on your floor for much cheaper. I've never purchased a circle mat personally, and I've been fine. So there's a few options with creating circle mats. So the first is you can actually get one directly made. So if you go on Redbubble, which is a site that like sells like merchandise and t-shirts, you can actually upload any design and create your own account, and you can get it printed on a rug mat and sent to you. It'll probably be, I think it's like $50 to $60 to do this, but that's much lower than like 500 plus that you might see on Etsy. So you can do it through Redbubble and get like a proper circle mat just by basically uploading the image yourself. And you can either then sell it to other people or not. I don't know the actual logistics of that end of it, but I do know they can print one for you. As well, you can make one on like, this is of course like, the way that I used to do it. I've definitely recommended this method before, but basically what you can do is you can go to like a craft store and you can get like a big piece of either poster board or like a really big piece of paper like they make for like, parade banners. And you can draw the circle in Sharpie on that paper and you can reuse it and basically keep it. Now, if it's a really flimsy paper, I mean, it's not going to last you forever, but it'll at least last you a while. I recommend if you're going to do this, getting like a good quality like material for it. But yeah, you can make your own, and you can do it with like acrylic paint if you want. Like you can create your own circle like pretty easily, even without sewing one yourself. Of course, you can obviously sew one yourself, but I don't have those skills, so I can't entirely recommend the logistics of that one. But if you are skilled enough, like you can definitely make your own. But yeah, try it on paper or, like a poster board or something like that. As well, the next thing is if your floors are specific materials, you can actually draw it on the floor. Now, I don't want to wholesale recommend drawing the circles on the ground because it really depends on your floor, and you can cause a lot of property damage if your floor is not one that can be drawn on. But if your floor is specific surfaces, you can try it with chalk, you can try it with like dry erase markers. I had a floor that was like kind of like think it was a linoleum type material, but whatever exactly it was called, it was like a kind of, anyways, whatever it was, I'm sorry guys, I'm not an architect. I could use dry erase markers on it, and I would like dry erase my circles. And yeah, of course, if it's wood, like certain woods, you can use chalk. Now, if you're like really fancy and you have like a little specific like designated ritual room, you can use chalkboard paint like on the floor, and then you can do all the chalk circles and be very like cool and grimoire about it. But yeah, there's so many options with circles. As well, you can use like ropes and tapes. That's another method. Some people like to use like red tape or something like that. So there's many ways to create a circle besides like buying a pre-made circle mat. As well, since, you know, buying one is such an investment, I really do recommend trying one of these methods before you go on to commission or purchase a circle mat, just because you might not know if you're even going to use it, like if that's even going to be something you reach for. So you definitely want to, you know, be conscious about decisions like that. Tip is going to really, you know, benefit everyone, even people who are devotional religious people. So sometimes instead of offerings, you can do devotional acts. So devotional acts, I recommend them a lot. And honestly, I think they can be more powerful a lot of the time. But that's basically where you do a dedicated thing in honor to a spirit instead of like giving them stuff. So some devotional acts could be like, I've recommended a number of times, you know, lifting weights or exercising as a devotional offering for a war god. I dedicate a lot of my exercises, so that's one that I always immediately think of. But also like, you know, writing a poem for Apollo, you know, or writing a song for Venus, right? There's so many devotional acts you can try. And since it is creation is such a divine process, that can be a really good way to even deepen a relationship, especially if it's something like creating a hymn or creating a ritual or, you know, teaching about a spirit, right? Like all of those things can be really powerful devotional acts that can be just as strong, if not stronger, than a traditional offering of, say, wine or honey or something like that. Next tip is another DIY craft type thing. But if you use prayer beads, mala beads, or any sort of like beaded necklace type situation to either count, you know, a mantra, count a prayer, or anything like that, those are pretty easy to DIY. Okay, look, guys, I'm not crafty, okay? I'm artistically, in terms of like drawing and painting, a little bit challenged, and I have been able to do this myself. If you like get like bead making supplies from like a craft store, it's pretty straightforward. You basically just, you know, layer it and you tie it. Like it's not that complicated, and there's a lot of really good tutorials, but prayer beads and mala beads are just such an easy way to DIY. Now, those, when they do go for sale, are really not that expensive. So, you know, if like making it seems like a lot of work, like this would be one where like maybe you don't need to DIY it, but if you want to DIY something, this is definitely a approachable DIY. And when you do make it yourself, you can get really, you know, specific with the correspondences. You can pick the stones, you can pick, you know, the chain material, you know, you can get really, really specific, and you can find like specific charms to represent a deity. So like, let's say you're making a set of prayer beads to Pan, like you could use like a pan flute bead to sort of help represent his energy even more. So that's a great little like DIY you can try out. Tip is to use tea light candles when you can. So tea light candles are these little tiny candles. They even sell them at the grocery store. I actually buy my pack from the grocery store. But I love tea light candles. They come in packs of like 50 to 100, and they're very, very cheap. And these, you can use them in so many rituals, right? So if a ritual doesn't call for, say, a pillar candle or a 7-day candle, tea lights are just, they're so accessible, and you can get them in other colors. They do make them in other colors. Most of the time they do default to being in white, so you might need to order them if you want them in another color. But this is a great way to save money, because if you're, you know, let's say a ritual calls for like 6 white candles, like 6 7-day candles versus 6 tea lights, that's a big financial difference. So tea lights candles are just such a great way to save money, especially if you're doing ritual very regularly. So definitely check those out. They're really awesome, and they have also like a burn time that is pretty good. Like they don't burn for that long. So a lot of times if you light a tea light, they'll have burnt down like right when you finish your ritual, or like, you know, maybe like 30 minutes after your ritual. Like they don't burn for that long. So it's also convenient in that way. You know, you never have to have that anxiety about leaving a burning candle, you know, when you finished your ritual. My next tip is to learn how to carve on a candle. So basically with a 7-day candle, if you like take it out of its glass, you can carve into it. They make candle carving tools, but you also can like, you know, use it with like, I don't know, you could carve it with a sharp object in your house. But you can carve sigils and God names onto those candles and really customize them and make them your own. And if you do commission a carved candle, that does tend to be a little bit expensive. As well, kind of in that same realm, if you want to make a deity candle candle on your own, what you can do is you can basically buy the glass that a 7-day candle goes in, and you can paint on the glass. There's also a seller on Etsy who does really, really beautiful versions of this. Basically, like, you can paint your own candle, and then you can swap the insertable candles around. So you can make your own like permanent deity candles by always having, you know, like basically a glass sleeve that's painted on, and then you can swap out the inner candle. For my witchy people, if you use a lot of herbs and spices in your spells and rituals, look in your spice cabinet. You don't need to just get like designated herbs for witchcraft. You don't need to buy those big like herb kits. A lot of the time the herbs are in your pantry, especially if you're like me and you cook a lot. Okay, if you cook regularly, you actually have so many herbs you can use in your spells. Like, honestly, most spells you probably have at least something for if you're a regular cook or baker. So don't forget to check out your pantry. Yeah, it has so much in it that might really help you out. That's a little bit lame, but it is basically about occult books. So in the occult community, we love books. We love book collections. We love seeing, you know, people's beautiful shelves and shelves of occult books. Like, it's just so nice to see it. But when it comes to your collection, shop with intention, right? I recommend, you know, if you want to learn something, look for, you know, a book in that category that's specific to what you want to learn. I find often, you know, just going into the Barnes & Noble is not going to get you the best occult books. Often small independent publishers make better work, to be completely honest. So when you're looking for occult books, really do like browse for a bit. Like, don't just, you know, impulse buy whatever's in your Barnes & Noble. Basically shop with intention. If you do this, you'll end up buying less, and what you do buy, you'll love for longer and you'll hold on to for longer. On that same kind of note, if there is, you know, books in your collection that no longer serves you, you know, things that don't relate to your practice and, you know, don't hold any value to you, you absolutely can resell them to used bookstores. And this is actually really good because used bookstores, you know, when it comes to occult material, it tends to sell really fast. I talked to some people who run used bookstores, and if they get an occult book in, it almost always goes out. There's a high demand for them in used bookstores. So if you do, you know, sell off old used books to recoup a little bit of your investment into them, you know, someone else can learn from them. You know what I mean? Like, you can, you know, help another younger practitioner, you know, read those materials. And if they're at a used bookstore, they may not have the means. So that can really help someone who's newer to the craft, who really could use that material. Now, once again, don't sell your whole collection. I think having a collection is fine. I'm not opposed to collecting. I don't hold those values, but I do think if there's something that you have that you are never going to read again and that no longer serves you, I think it is okay to let that go and let someone else learn from it in the future. Next tip is about your tarot deck. So we all have tarot decks. If you have a tarot deck, you have every correspondence you might ever need. Lon Milo Duquette, when he was talking to me, said that when he travels, if he's in a hotel room and he needs to do a ritual and he doesn't have his tools, he just uses his Thoth tarot deck. With that Thoth tarot deck, he has everything he needs to create an entire ceremonial magic temple. If you have a tarot deck, you have a temple. Those tarot cards correspond to planets, gematria, numerology, you know, the elements, right? You can create a whole temple out of tarot. Technically, you would actually never need to buy a tool ever if you have a tarot deck. That deck alone can represent so much. So if you ever are doing a ritual and there's something you're missing, you know, you don't need to jump onto Etsy. You can just reach for your tarot deck, especially if it's a classic deck like the Rider-Waite or the Thoth tarot deck. Personally, because of my Thelema background, I do think the Thoth deck is best for ritual purposes. Like, I would skip using a novelty deck, like, you know, those decks that are like the Tattoo Tarot or like, I don't know, like the Eye Color Tarot or, you know, the Kawaii Tarot, like those, you know, those can be fun for divination, but I would skip them when it comes to ritual correspondence. So technically they do work. So if you're in a pinch, you absolutely can use those. But if you are going to regularly use tarot as a layer of correspondence, I do recommend the Rider-Waite or the Thoth deck. But yeah, if you have that deck, you have every correspondence you will ever need. Literally, you could have that and that'd be everything forever. You wouldn't even need candles because some of those cards represent fire, so the candle technically is represented. After all, remember, the law of correspondence is why we have anything in ritual at all. We don't have tools in ritual to just, you know, be tools. They're there to represent something higher and represent something deeper. Like a 2-in-1 tip, and it's about buying tools. So if you're a ceremonial magician, you're gonna have to buy tools at some point. And I have a kind of rule about tools. I don't buy a tool unless it is necessary in my practice. So I don't buy things because I think they're cool or I think they're nifty. I get them when they come up. So basically, if I've done a ritual that needed that tool and I had to do some sort of substitution and I want to do a ritual like that again, that's when I think it's kind of like a good time. So basically, if you've done a ritual that uses the thing that you haven't had, after that point, I think you can get it. So like go one ritual to make sure you actually use that correspondence. And then after that, I think it's okay to buy it. I don't agree with buying like ritual kits. There's a whole like industry on Etsy where people sell like these ritual kits where it comes with like an athame, a dagger, a chalice, a pentacle. I don't like those because I think what happens is people get those and they have a lot of things they don't need. And also I do think these kits as a whole, not always, but on the whole, definitely do overcharge for the specific items. So buy things when they come up. Like if you use a chalice, get a chalice then. Like don't get it preemptively. I think with ceremonial magicians, we can be really bad about this. Like we can be like, ooh, I want the Enochian banners. Hell yeah, I want the Enochian banners. But like, then you realize the Enochian banners have not come up in your practice yet. And oh God, you just did an Enochian call and you're absolutely not ready for the Enochian banners. You know what I mean? Like get the Enochian banners when you are ready to do Enochian. Like after you've done a call of the Aethers, then maybe get the Enochian banners. Don't get them preemptively. So basically get things as they matter. So my very last tip is about incenses. So the most cost-efficient way to get incense is typically to buy cone incense in bulk packs. This has been my experience, and I think it's pretty much true. Basically, if you use a lot of incense, buy those big, so the cone packs, there's about 10 cones, 10 to 15 cones per pack, and they sell them in like these big packs. They're typically variety packs, and often you do kind of get like the less popular flavors. I always want to call incense smells flavors. I don't know what that says about me. I promise I do not eat incense, but you get what I mean. Like those variety packs are often like the cheapest way to get incense. So if you're burning incense on a daily basis, like definitely check that out. As well, I really like cone incenses. I like the way they like disperse. So yeah, that's my last tip. I'm Georgina Rose. If you want to support me, I'm an astrology reader and a tarot reader, and my booking information will be below. As well, I do a Patreon, and that's what sustains this channel. If you like videos like this, check out my Patreon. That's how I am able to do this and keep my lights on. You see the lights here? They would be off if there was no Patreon. And if you join the Patreon, you get a bonus video every month. You get my ritual guides every month, which are about 20 or more pages of custom rituals based on the current astrology of the time and current holidays. And I also do spiritual consultations where I basically do one-on-one mentoring where I help you, reach and learn about your spiritual goals. So that's like personal, training essentially. As well, I host the podcast Pagan Perspectives. That's on this channel. And it's also on Spotify under Pagan Perspectives by Georgina Rose. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. You can also find me on Twitter, Threads, Substack, TikTok. I'm pretty much everywhere that matters. Anyways, have a good day and afternoon. If you liked this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you have, been subscribed for 93 days, you will meet your holy guardian angel and you'll need no tools at all. And that's absolutely how that works. I'm definitely not just saying that. Anyways, see you guys in the next one. Bye.